Hello, everybody. I'm Mr. Degree over in room 9 at MacArthur, here to give you this presentation about National History Day. It's an introduction to kind of show you what it's about. It's a very exciting event, and we're going to have a History Day here at MacArthur, and the winners of that History Day will go on to the Orange County competition. The winners of that go to Sacramento, California. I believe it's all expenses paid. The winner of that goes to Washington, D.C. for the National History Day competition. Wouldn't that be so exciting for MacArthur students to win that? So let's go ahead and talk about National History Day. It is a competitive event separated into junior division and senior division. And it's an event where you can join as an individual or in groups of 2 to 5 students. You choose a topic. You create your thesis, which is an argument. You're going to be making an argument about something that happened in history and defending it with evidence, okay? Now, there are many different categories that we can choose from. This year, MacArthur students will compete in the exhibit, the paper, the website, or the documentary. And in each of these categories, you can join as an individual or a group of 2 to 5 students, depending upon what your teacher allows you to do. So the theme for this year is Frontiers in History, People, Places, and Events. Now, your thesis has to tie into the theme, okay? So you have to do a topic that is related to frontiers in history. There is an 11-minute video for students that I encourage you to watch in your classrooms, and it goes over what is this theme all about and gives you some ideas of what topics you can choose from. History rocks, and we know that. And one of the most exciting things about history is debating it and arguing it. So you need to prove your thesis with evidence. You're going to present your topic and include its historical context, showing where this fits in the particular time period that it happened in, what caused this event, what effects did it have, and also maybe talk a little bit about events happening elsewhere around the world. Perspectives. You're going to have to show perspective. So, of course, you're going to have your perspective. You're going to present that, but you're going to need to show what other people may think on this historical topic as well. Of course, be historically accurate. Make sure that all of your facts are correct. And beware that there are many websites out there that have false information. Show the significance of your topic. Your topic has to be of somewhat importance. Research. You're going to be starting with secondary sources and move on to primary sources. What are secondary sources? Things like textbooks, articles on credible websites, documentaries. So secondary sources are those things that somebody creates by his research, okay? That person was not there at the event. Primary source is an eyewitness account of something, a person who was actually there. So diaries, journals, and if you choose something within the last, 70 years, you can even interview people who were at the particular event and get their input. It's important to use a wide variety of sources. Okay, the winners of the National History Day usually have many secondary sources and many primary sources, and we will need to cite every source, right? So when you take notes, we will have to write the works cited on the page you took the notes on. This will be kind of maybe the challenging part for all of us, is how to do this, right? When you're taking your notes, and that is contained in the rule book for the National History Day event. Be honest, right? Do your own work. Don't plagiarize. So that's important in everything you do. But of course here, if you plagiarize, you will be disqualified. And here's just a little sample of an exhibit right here. Evaluation form. You will be judged 80% on historical quality, 20% on clarity of presentation, and be prepared to answer questions from the judges. Be prepared for that. Required written material. Okay, so there's a rule book, which I've included right here, and everybody, no matter what topic you choose, no matter what category you choose to participate in, you need a title page. And how it looks like is on page 18 of this rule book. You need a process paper that explains how you went about your research. And you need an annotated bibliography. That is on page 19. I felt like this presentation isn't the correct format to go into depth with those things. And of course, print your written materials on a plain white 8.5 by 11-inch paper with 1-inch margins on all sides and 12-point font. A4 paper will be accepted from international affiliates. Use single or double-sided printing. Staple materials in the top left corner. Do not enclose these materials in a binder, folder, etc. It's really important when we submit the paperwork that it's exactly as the rule book shows, or they will just disqualify our project. Category rules. So the website, the documentary, the exhibit, the category rules are found in this rule book, okay? And I believe that we'll be going over these together in class together. Steps. So this is how you go about it. Number 1, choose if you will create an individual project or a group of 2 to 5 projects. Choose your project. Will it be exhibit, paper, website, or documentary? Choose your topic and your thesis, historical argument. Research, research, research. Take notes. So I believe October, November, December, this is the time to do the research. Then put your project together in December and January. The MacArthur school-wide competition will be on January 19th. And the Orange County competition will be on March 11th. And then, of course, the state and then on to nationals. So work hard, compete on the 19th, and then it's possible also you can make your project a little better if you are one of the champions, make it a little better for that county competition. So if we do this step by step, we can create some great projects. Now, I want to just share with you kind of my favorite National History Day story. In the movie Jaws, there is a 4-minute scene where Quint retells what happened to him when he was on the USS Indianapolis. And it's a pretty scary story. And what ended up happening is many Navy servicemen were murdered or killed in the ocean, many of them by sharks. And the Navy wanted to keep it a secret. What happened is told in great detail in this 10-minute movie, okay? Now, this documentary down here was created by a student who made this documentary for the National History Day Project. Now, it's incredible, but this story from Jaws was just a story, okay? It wasn't really in history books anywhere. And a kid who's about 12 years old wanted to find out if it was true. So he made an exhibit for National History Day. He interviewed survivors from this incident, and they told him that the Navy had made a great mistake and that they had punished the captain of the ship, even when the captain wasn't guilty. And so this National History Day project received national attention, and the Navy looked at it again, and they did more research, and they realized that they had made a mistake. And so although the captain was dead, unfortunately, they took away his punishment. So for his family, at least, they knew that the captain did right. He did a good job. And so this National History Day project really changed how we study history. And then this 11-minute video, which is excellent, takes us through it. Now, what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go back and I'm going to click on the links to the videos that I skipped. Now, depending upon your class time, you can stop the video here, or you can continue to show it. I'm going to go ahead and click on this link. Hopefully it'll come up and the video will show. Let's see how it works. Sometimes this works right away. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time. So there it is. I'm going to make sure that I have the correct link here. Share computer sound. Good. Then it'll go. And we'll go ahead and watch this. This is all about the theme for the National History Day this year.
Frontiers in History. Often this theme leads us to think of the American West. We might think of open plains filled with cowboys, outlaws, sheriffs, Native Americans, pioneers, and farmers. But frontiers are everywhere, and they've been crossed throughout history.
Early humans pushed geographic boundaries, spread across the Earth's continents, and crossed its vast oceans. Ancient civilizations crossed frontiers to find resources, establish trading partners, and spread their ideas of government, economics, culture, and religion. Kingdoms, empires, and nation-states grew, expanded, clashed, collapsed, and re-established themselves over time. Individuals and groups of people crossed frontiers in science, medicine, art, literature, and technology. To determine whether an event in history crosses a frontier, consider these three ideas. First, people, often referred to as pioneers, crossed frontiers. Pioneers adapted to unknown situations. They used creativity, ingenuity, and grit. Second, a frontier is a place in history with a clear before and after. Once a frontier is crossed, history changes. Finally, pioneers develop ideas to survive and thrive in these new environments.
The myth of the American West.
Many classic accounts from the American West center on stories of white settlers and heroic cowboys, but this idea is not as clear as it might seem. While many Americans pushed what they perceived as the frontier further west, they were not moving into unsettled land. For centuries, Native nations called the American West home. These indigenous peoples developed advanced systems of farming, hunting, and gathering that sustained complex indigenous cultures, religions, and nations. They lived on the Great Plains, in the desert Southwest, along the California coast, and in the Pacific Northwest. When considering the frontiers of the American West, consider multiple perspectives. While the Dakota Territory was a frontier to American settlers, it was home to many Native nations, including the Chippewa, Mandan, and Lakota. In what ways did the U.S. federal government encourage settlers to move west? What role did railroads play? How did Native nations and white settlers interact? In what ways did conflict and disease challenge both communities?
The history of the American West contains many lesser-known stories. What new voices might you uncover? For instance, what are the contributions of Asian Americans to the formation of the American West? Students interested in immigrant stories might look to the frontiers in Asian American history. The National Endowment for the Humanities, A More Perfect Union initiative, commemorating the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, asks you to explore stories that reflect our journey toward a more inclusive and just society. What role did Chinese immigrants play on the Western frontier? Consider the contributions made by Chinese immigrants as builders of the Transcontinental Railroad. What were their experiences? What prejudices did they face? In what ways did they speak out against injustices in their communities? How did women cross social and political frontiers in the American West? In 1869, the territory of Wyoming became the first to grant women the right to vote, due in part to Dr. Grace Raymond Hebert. An engineer in the Wyoming State Engineering Office, Hebert lobbied for women's suffrage. In 1890, Wyoming became the first state where women could vote. How did Hebert and others pave the way for future female leaders, like Wyoming's first governor, Nellie Taylor Ross? In what ways do women's histories challenge preconceived notions of the American West?
Pioneers cross frontiers.
Why do people cross frontiers? Do they have economic or personal goals? What drives a person or group of people to leave their homes and venture somewhere new? What factors push or pull groups of people to seek a new life in a new place? Do you have to leave your home to become a pioneer? History is full of stories of migrants and immigrants. Local history offers fascinating examples of those who crossed frontiers without ever leaving their hometowns. Consider the story of Levi Garland Nelson, owner of Nelson's Barbershop. How did Nelson traverse a frontier when he and other newly freed Black men opened barbershops in places like Doylestown, Pennsylvania, after the American Civil War? Does Nelson's story demonstrate how the Black community crossed economic frontiers? How can local history provide evidence of the struggle for Black freedom, equality, and prosperity in the United States?
In the 1850s, there were few vocational or educational occupations for women. Why did schools, like the Women's Medical College of Pennsylvania, create opportunities for women, including women of color, to become physicians? In what ways were pioneer physicians such as Doctors Catherine McFarland, Ruth Jackson, Alma D. Marani, and Virginia Apgar trailblazers? Did they change the way medicine was practiced? Provide care to those who could not afford it? In what ways did these pioneers influence how medicine is practiced today? What stories can you find in your local history? Do you see your ancestors or other local figures challenging boundaries and creating new opportunities for themselves and their communities?
Frontiers are places in history.
How and where do we create cities and towns? And what do we consider the edges of civilization? What planning goes into their creation? Do people build towns and cities with specific goals in mind? Frontiers are places in history. Once a frontier is crossed, history changes. Consider the stories of planned communities. The National Park Service explores different communities from the colonial period to the mid-20th century. These historic sites explore frontiers where settlements establish military outposts, religious communities, or agricultural settlements where none had previously existed. Why were these places formed? Do they represent frontiers? For whom? How did these places influence the people who came to live there?
Ideas creating frontiers.
Can ideas be frontiers? How do innovations in technology, science, and the arts open new lines of thought? In what ways do inventions and innovations change the way we live? In the 18th century, an independent American nation was a radical idea. The idea of a representative democracy replacing a monarchy pushed the boundaries of political thought and practice. What philosophers influenced the revolution's leaders? Where do we see these ideas in the Declaration of Independence, the Articles of Confederation, or the U.S. Constitution? Fast forward to the early 20th century in moving picture technology. Films captured expeditions to new geographic frontiers, the North and South Poles. Students might explore the life and adventures of Louise Arner Boyd, who photographed and filmed some of the earliest images of the Arctic. What did she uncover about these underexplored regions? Can her work be considered a frontier? How and why? What influence did her work have on the science of glaciology, biology, or astronomy?
Frontiers in world history.
The theme of Frontiers in History, People, Places, Ideas, challenges students to explore new frontiers of their history education. Frontiers do not just exist in U.S. history. Students might explore Muslim mathematician Al-Khwarizmi's work on algebra in the 900s. Did these early advances in math change society? How have others broadened those areas of study over time? Consider the development of written language, such as the ancient Sumerian development of cuneiform. In what ways did written language influence what we know of ancient civilizations? Students interested in world politics might explore the actions of Simón Bolívar, known as El Libertador, and his efforts to liberate Venezuela from Spain, or look to Mahatma Gandhi and his role as a leader in India's independence movement. How did these leaders resist colonial regimes? Did they achieve their goals for independence? In what ways did they cross political, economic, military, or social frontiers?
Frontiers are everywhere. They are crossed every day. The pioneers who crossed frontiers faced unknown situations that forced them to adapt and change. These new ideas change the way we live, work, and play. Seek out new places, consider new voices, find new ideas. Frontiers can be found throughout history. We cannot wait to see what stories you uncover in your 2023 National History Day project.
Pretty awesome there. So many different ways to interpret frontier, right? Many different ways. It's kind of wide open for you. And now I'd love to show you this YouTube version, the 4-minute talk about the story of Jaws with the USS Indianapolis, and then show you the documentary that I think a 12-year-old student made, okay? And that'll finish our introduction to this History Day project that we're gonna start here at MacArthur. So let's go ahead and check this out. Coming up right now.
You created a business. Now, create videos for your business, easily and instantly.
Japanese submarine 2 torpedoes into our side, Chief. He was coming back from the island of Tinian to Leyte, just delivered the bomb, the Hiroshima bomb. 700 men went into the water. Vessel went down in 12 minutes. Didn't see the first shark for about half an hour. Tiger, 13-footer. You know that when you're in the water, Chief? You tell by looking from the dorsal to the tail. What we didn't know, our bomb mission had been so secret, no distress signal had been sent. They didn't even list us overdue for a week. Very first light, Chief. Sharks come cruising. So we formed ourselves into tight groups. Kind of like old squares in a battle, like you see in the calendar, like the Battle of Waterloo. And the idea was, shark comes the nearest man, that man he start pounding and hollering and screaming. Sometimes the shark would go away. Sometimes he wouldn't go away. Sometimes that shark, he looks right into you, right into your eyes. You know the thing about a shark, he's got lifeless eyes, black eyes, like a doll's eyes. When he comes at you, he doesn't seem to be living until he bites you. And those black eyes roll over white, and then you hear that terrible high-pitched screaming. The ocean turns red. In spite of all the pounding and the hollering, they all come in, they rip you to pieces. By the end of that first dawn, lost 100 men. I don't know how many sharks, maybe 1,000. I don't know how many men. They average 6 an hour. On Thursday morning, Chief, I bumped into a friend of mine, Herbie Robinson from Cleveland. Baseball player, bosun's mate. I thought he was asleep. Reached over to wake him up. Bobbed up and down in the water. It was like a kind of top. Upended. Well, he'd been bitten in half below the waist. On the 5th day, Mr. Hooper, Lockheed Ventura, so he swung in low and he saw us too. The young pilot, a lot younger than Mr. Hooper anyway, he saw us and he come in low. And 3 hours later, a big fat PBY comes down and started to pick us up. That was the time I was most frightened, waiting for my turn. I'll never put on a life jacket again. So 1,100 men went in the war. 316 men come out. The Sharks took the rest June the 29th, 1945. Anyway, we delivered the bomb.
Okay, so that's the story that inspired this 12-year-old kid to find out what actually happens on that day. He made this exhibit, and later this other kid made this documentary. And this is a 10-minute documentary that was put in to the National History Day competition. And this will end my little presentation here as kind of an introduction to hopefully get you guys excited, get you guys thinking about some ideas of what you can do, okay? So watch this documentary, and then that'll be.
The USS Indianapolis was a Portland-class heavy cruiser used as a ship of state for President Roosevelt. In 1941, she became the flagship of the Navy's Fifth Fleet during World War II. It has been said that from her decks the Pacific War was won. She defined triumph. But on March 30th, 1945, a few minutes past midnight, the greatest naval tragedy at sea would happen. This is the story of the USS Indianapolis and of the men who sailed her. The USS Indianapolis saw action in some of the most decisive battles in the Pacific theater, triumphantly earning 10 battle stars. But on March 31st, 1945, at Okinawa, the USS Indianapolis was majorly damaged by a kamikaze plane. The damage sustained forced the USS Indianapolis to return to the California shipyards for repair. While here, Charles McVay, the captain of the USS Indianapolis, learned that his ship was to engage in a top-secret mission. Captain McVay was given no details, only that they were to deliver a secret cargo that could mean the end of the war.
After taking aboard a large crate that was approximately 5 by 12 or something like that, and it was guarded by Marines 24 hours a day.
On July 26th, the USS Indianapolis arrived at Tinian Island, where their secret cargo was unloaded. Afterwards, they left for Guam, where they received orders to head to Leyte. Captain McVay was told all was quiet and was not given an escort. He was not told the USS Underhill had been sunk by a submarine in the same waters just 3 days earlier.
They had reports of subs from other ships going through their contacts and everything. They had sent other ships out there, destroyers, to try and find these subs. They knew the subs were there, they didn't tell us.
Shortly after midnight on July 30th, the USS Indianapolis was hit by 2 torpedoes. Orders were given to abandon ship. The U.S. Navy intercepted a message sent by Japanese submarine commander Captain Hashimoto that he had sunk an American ship. SOS messages were also received. These messages were seen as a Japanese trick, as it was unfathomable that the ship the size of the Indianapolis could sink in just 12 minutes. Approximately 900 men found themselves in a mixture of salt water and oil. Many men could not swim. Many could not find life vests. The explosion of the torpedoes had also attracted sharks. Despite the horrors, the sailors held on to hope of rescue.
We were due in at Leyte about noon, and we were optimistic that somebody would be looking for us.
However, at the Leyte operations base, there was confusion regarding the protocol of reporting non-arrivals. When Leyte noticed that the Indianapolis had not arrived on Tuesday, nothing was done. As day and night blended together, men began to suffer from starvation and dehydration. The urge to drink the salt water overcame many.
When you drink water, salt water, on an empty stomach, you got about 3 to maybe 4 hours to live. I've seen it. Foam comes to your mouth, your eyeballs pop out. Highly too concentrated with salt. It'll kill you.
Salt water, dehydration, and sun exposures also led to hallucinations. Some thought they saw islands. Others thought their friends were Japanese spies. As the days wore on, another problem began to emerge.
See, them Cape Out lights are going good for 72 hours. I was out there 104.
On August 2nd, the 4th day, pilot Wilbur Glynn in a PV-1 Navy bomber was out testing a communications antenna when he spotted what he thought was a submarine oil slick. He ordered for bombs to be loaded. As he prepared for his bombing run, however, he began to see heads bobbing in the water. Survivor Harold Bray still gets emotional recalling that day.
I seen this dot in the horizon. It turned out to be this airplane. It kept coming and coming and coming at us, and we were all screaming and hollering.
Responding to Gwynn's report of ducks in the water, Navy pilot Adrian Marks in a PBY amphibious plane flew to the area and witnessed men dying. Against standing orders, Marks landed in the open sea. Marks had no time to respond to the questions coming from his commanders, nor could he answer the questions being asked by those he rescued.
Why didn't they know we were missing? Why weren't they looking for us? Why?
Slower moving vessels did not arrive until late on the fifth night. Captain Claytor of the USS Doyle, realizing the gravity of the situation, gave an order never given in wartime before. In an area with known submarine activity, he told his men to turn on the searchlights and pointed at the sky. He wanted the men in the water to know help was on its way.
That's what we try to tell these guys. Don't die. Look out there, there's a light.
Of the 1,196 men who were aboard the USS Indianapolis for her final mission, only 316, including Captain Charles McVay, were pulled from the waters. Survivors received care at hospital stations set up across the Pacific for their physical wounds. It was in the hospital on August 6, 1945, that survivors learned what they had delivered on their secret mission to Tinian, the components including the uranium for the atomic bomb. On that day, the first bomb, Little Boy, was dropped on Hiroshima. The atomic bomb delivered by the USS Indianapolis had set in motion the beginning of forced peace with Japan, and though its results were tragic, it also triumphantly prevented the deadliest amphibious attack in history, called the greatest battle never fought. However, as the nation learned war was ending, families of those lost at sea from the USS Indianapolis received telegrams conveying news of their loved ones' deaths. Many blamed the ship's captain, and the Navy responded by court-martialing McVay for failing to zigzag.
The first time in history Navy captain court-martial. First time in the history of Navy they ever brought a Japanese captain over out of the submarine to testify against the captain. When he got through talking, he was for the captain, because zigzagging would have made no difference.
Ultimately, Captain McVay was found guilty and accepted the blame quietly. And although his testimony led to major changes in survival equipment aboard naval vessels, the story of the USS Indianapolis and the court-martialing of her captain simply fell into obscurity. Most of the survivors never spoke of what occurred. Many expressed a sense of loss and guilt. But like most events in history, it takes time for what truly happened to find its proper place. In 1960, a push was made to have a USS Indianapolis survivor reunion, and every survivor, including Captain Charles McVay, was invited.
They asked the captain to come, and he didn't know whether we still blamed him or not, but when he showed up, he found out we was 100% behind him, and he couldn't believe it.
The survivors' organization stated their main goal would be the exoneration of Captain McVay. This would take nearly 40 years, and McVay would not live to see the results. One of the most compelling arguments for his exoneration came from former Japanese submarine commander Captain Hashimoto, who wrote, "I have met many of your brave men who survived the sinking of the Indianapolis. Our people have forgiven each other for that terrible war and its consequences. Perhaps it is time your peoples forgave Captain McVay for the humiliation of his unjust conviction." President Clinton signed legislation exonerating Captain McVay in 2000. Mistakes were made in the tragedy of the USS Indianapolis, but at the same time, the survivors and rescuers are examples of Navy's finest. Not only because they shaped history by delivering the atomic bomb, and not just because they survived shark-infested waters, but because of their conduct each and every day following, because of how they continue to serve, forgive, and honor each other. It is they that define triumph.
All right, so that video was when the theme for the National History Day was triumph and tragedy. Triumph and tragedy. It really tells it well. So pretty awesome, though, as I told you, that a different kid who watched that Jaws video then did the research, and that was the thing that spurred a lot of the men to really try to get the captain forgiven. So pretty amazing thing, this National History Day that we're going to compete in. Be nice to your teachers who are doing a little bit of extra work in it. And I'm really excited to see all of your projects. I'm Mr. Degree from Room 9, signing out. Bye-bye.